Hello and welcome to Benefits Weekly. We're your hosts, Kyle Estep and Eric Johnson. If you work in health insurance or employee benefits, we want to be your go-to resource for taking complex topics and making them easy to understand. All right, our topic this week has to do with small group health insurance. And it's a kind of a mouthful. It's the special open enrollment period, or maybe just the open enrollment period. But it's got some quirks. Not a lot of people know about it. And so, Eric, I want to kick it to you because you were just explaining about this to me the other day, and I learned a lot. So, can you help us understand what it is?
Sure. Anyone who works in group health insurance knows that most insurance companies have a participation and a contribution requirement. They require a certain percentage of employees to participate in the plan and the employer to contribute a certain percentage to the employee only premium. And that actually varies by carrier and it varies by state. So there's not a universal rule here, but in most areas, that is a requirement. And basically, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, we have one time a year. It's between November 15th and December 15th, or here in Texas, where you and I are, Kyle, it's November 1st through December 15th, where those participation and contribution requirements are not enforced. And so a group can actually sign up without having to contribute to the premium and without having to get a certain number of employees to enroll.
Gotcha. And backing up, what would typically be a minimum threshold for employer contribution or employee level participation? Like if you're, going to get a group health plan from a major insurance company.
Again, it does differ or vary by
Mm,
carrier and by state. So if we look just at Texas, where we are, the maximum participation that a carrier can require is 75%. And so that's what most of them do. So 75% of all eligible full-time employees after you take out those that have other group or individual coverage. So those are called valid waivers. And then on the contribution, there's not actually a state requirement. It just says that if an insurance company puts a rule in place, they have to enforce it across the board. They can't be selective in the way they apply it. And so most insurance companies have settled on 50% of the employee premium. Again, it's different in different states. California, as an example, they have a minimum participation if the employer does it as a percentage of premium, but they could do a flat dollar amount of $100. There are some states that don't allow the carrier to enforce a contribution requirement at all. Others, it might be 70%. So it's just kind of all over the board and there's no universal rule.
yeah, just a quick anecdote there. Back in the mid to late 2010s, as I was building a health plan and we were launching small group products all over the country from Tennessee to California to New York, New Jersey, I remember our underwriters starting to pull their hair out as they realized they needed to adjust the underwriting and enrollment guidelines on a per market basis because we did see wide variance there. Well, jumping to this no participation, no contribution requirement period, that we're talking about here in November, December. I guess the question I have is if you're a small employer and you're not going to be helping to pay for the health insurance for your employees, i.e., you're not going to have a contribution you put out there where you split the cost with the employees, why would you maybe want to take advantage of this?
Yeah. Obviously from an employer standpoint, it makes sense because not every employer can afford to meet the carrier's minimum contribution amount. A lot of times it may be that the owner, the owner's spouse, maybe a couple of key employees want health insurance, so they can't get the participation they need, or the company can't afford the contribution. This gives them a really good option. But as for the employees, um, it's kind of interesting because some employees are actually hurt by the employer offering a health plan because if it's affordable, it blocks them from getting a tax credit. This doesn't directly answer your question, but one of the benefits to employees is if they would qualify for a tax credit, they could actually probably decline the employer coverage and go purchase an individual plan and get that financial assistance because without an employer contribution, it is probably considered unaffordable for them. So for those
And
employees who
I
weren't that
can jump
interested
in.
in
I want to
this,
make sure I'm understanding that real quick. So let's say
sure.
I work at, Acme Brick Company, and they say, "Hey, we're gonna offer you health insurance,
Hmm.
but we're not gonna help pay for it. You're gonna have to pay full boat." And maybe I've got a family of 4. I actually do have a family of 4, and it's gonna cost me $1,000 a month for this health coverage. And I'm just like, "Wow, that's a lot. I can't afford it." I can basically say, "Hey, no thanks, Acme Co." And I'm going to go over to healthcare.gov here in Texas, and I'm going to see, oh, actually, I qualify for $600 or $700 in tax credits or subsidies. And therefore, over here, I only got to pay a couple $100 a month for maybe equivalent coverage, maybe not. But either way, maybe a lot less out of my pocket month to month. And that's, I think, kind of the research that on the employee level they'll need to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, some employees clearly will not qualify for a tax credit, and we'll talk about them in a second. But for those that would otherwise qualify for a tax credit, the fact that the employer is offering coverage and not making that full 50% contribution that they normally would or more, um, that means that those employees that would get the tax credit likely still can. So it's a benefit for the ones that aren't as interested in the group coverage. For those that would like group coverage for the various reasons that, most employees like group coverage, there's more plans available. They might be able to get a PPO rather than an HMO. They can pay with tax-free dollars through a Section 125 premium only plan. All of those benefits remain in place. The only thing that isn't there is that normal employer contribution, but it still is a valuable benefit just having access to group coverage for, for the owners, for the some of the key employees that do want it.
That's great. Now, are there any special instructions or things that employers or benefits brokers should know in terms of being able to take advantage of this special open enrollment period or whatever we call it?
Sure. So, yeah, on the naming, I mean, it's all over the board. The official name is the small group open enrollment period. Some call it the special open enrollment period. Some call it, I've always referred to it as the no participation, no contribution period. You also hear participation and contribution holiday. So there's all sorts of names. The whole reason this exists is because the Affordable Care Act says that all plans in all markets are guaranteed issue. That didn't allow for carriers to enforce these normal participation and contribution requirements to try to prevent adverse selection, which is, the tendency for the sick people to sign up and the healthy people not to, right? Um, it's what helps insurers stay profitable. And so the government said, to comply with the Affordable Care Act, but to also give the carriers the ability to enforce contribution requirements and participation requirements. What we're going to do is 11 months of the year allow them to do that. 1 month a year, they have to take anybody who applies for coverage. So, as for the special rules, it's a one-time option, or at least it's an initial year option. So a small employer can apply for coverage during that 4 to 6 weeks for a January 1st effective date. And then they've got a year that they don't have to meet those requirements. The plans, though, are not guaranteed renewable. And so a carrier could, if they wanted, at the end of that first year, require the employer to get in compliance and to meet the normal participation and contribution requirements. Now, some enforce that pretty strictly, some are a lot more lax about it.
Interesting. I guess it can get a little tricky as we think about those renewal years. But, that's where I guess where we shout out the great article that Eric, you helped put together this week, where we go into a lot of these topics in more detail. So, what I'll tell our audience is, thanks again for tuning into Benefits Weekly. Please dive into that content we've pulled together, a part of this topic. Let us know what you think. And as always, if you find it valuable, please share it with a friend.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.